Hey everyone, and welcome back. Today we're going to be looking into something that I know a lot of you have been asking about, knob and tube wiring. So this is going to be a deep dive into what it is,
Yeah.
why it could be a problem in your house, and what can be done about it.
Right. It's really an interesting topic, and it's something that we get asked about a lot. So
Yeah.
I'm excited to dive in and see what we can uncover.
Okay, well before we go any further, some people listening might not even know what we're talking about.
Yeah. Yeah. So knob and tube wiring was a method for wiring houses that was popular in the late 1800s, early 1900s, up until about the 1940s, and it was a way to insulate individual wires from the structure of the home. So it was a very innovative system for its time. It's named that because it uses these porcelain knobs and tubes to run the wire. So the wires are typically run through the wall cavities and the ceiling cavities, and they're supported by these ceramic knobs. There are also these ceramic tubes that are used to run the wires through joists and studs.
So you're basically keeping those live wires away from any wood or anything flammable.
Exactly. Exactly. It was really, like I said, innovative system for its time. And it did a great job of preventing fires because the main cause of fires back then was electrical shorts. And so they needed a way to isolate those wires, and knob and tube was a way to do that.
So it sounds like it was pretty effective for its time, but I'm guessing there's a reason why we don't use it anymore. What are some of the main issues or drawbacks with knob and tube wiring today?
Yeah. So the main issue with knob and tube is that it doesn't have a ground wire. So in a modern electrical system, we have three wires.
Right.
We have a hot wire, a neutral wire, and a ground wire.
Correct.
And that ground wire is there to protect us from electrical shock and also to protect our appliances in case of a fault. But knob and tube doesn't have that ground wire.
Yeah.
And so that's a major safety concern because if there's a fault in the system, there's no place for that electricity to go, and it could potentially cause a fire.
Wow. Okay. So no ground wire. That's a biggie. I can see why that would be a concern.
Yeah.
But are there other issues that people should be aware of too? I mean, we're talking about wiring that's like 80 or 90 years old in some cases. So it must have deteriorated some over time, right?
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. So another issue with knob and tube is the insulation. The insulation that they used back then was it was a rubberized cloth insulation.
Right.
And over time, that insulation can dry out and crack and crumble. And that can expose the bare wires, which is a fire hazard. So you've got those exposed wires, and then you've got the lack of grounding. And those are the two big safety concerns with knob and tube.
So basically it's a recipe for disaster. Is that what you're saying?
Well, I wouldn't say it's a recipe for disaster, but it's definitely something that you need to be aware of.
Right.
And if you have knob and tube wiring in your home, it's important to have it inspected by a qualified electrician.
Yeah, that makes sense. I mean, I wouldn't want to mess around with electrical wiring myself. So what are some signs that that people should look out for that might indicate there's a problem with their knob and tube wiring? Like what kind of things should they be paying attention to?
Yeah. So some common signs that there might be a problem with your knob and tube wiring include flickering lights.
Okay.
That's a common one. Also frequently tripped circuit breakers, outlets that are warm to the touch or discolored,
Okay.
and any burning smell coming from an outlet or a switch.
Yeah. Okay. Definitely sounds like things you don't want to ignore.
Right, exactly. If you notice any of those things, it's important to call a licensed electrician right away, and he can come out and take a look.
So let's say our listener is starting to get a little nervous because they've got some of these signs. They think they might have knob and tube wiring. What's the first step they should take?
The first step is to have it inspected by a licensed electrician.
Okay, and they'll be able to tell if it's dangerous or needs to be replaced or what.
Exactly. A licensed electrician can come in and assess the condition of your wiring, and they can tell you if it needs to be repaired or replaced.
Okay.
And they can also give you an idea of how much it's going to cost.
So it's kind of like a checkup for your home's electrical system.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And it's a good idea to have it done, even if you're not experiencing any problems.
Just for peace of mind, right?
Exactly. Just for peace of mind.
Okay. So we've established that having a professional come in and inspect your wiring is crucial. But let's talk about upgrading. I mean, what does that actually involve? Are we talking about ripping out walls and completely rewiring the entire house? Or are there less invasive options?
It doesn't always have to be a major overhaul. Sometimes you can strategically rewire just the areas with the highest electrical demand. like kitchens and bathrooms.
Okay, so maybe not a complete gut job. That's a relief. But still, those old wires are often hidden away. Like, how do you even get to them to replace them? I'm thinking like inside walls and ceilings.
Yeah, it's definitely a bit of a puzzle, but that's where experience comes in. Electricians who specialize in older homes are really skilled at working with those hidden pathways,
Yeah.
and they can often access the wiring through existing junction boxes
Okay.
or by making small strategic openings that can be easily patched up later. So it's not as disruptive as you might think.
So it's kind of like a combination of detective work and surgery. I like it.
Eh.
Okay, but let's talk about what's involved in an upgrade. What are some key things that homeowners should know about?
Well, first and foremost, you want to find a licensed electrician who specializes in older homes, because not all electricians have the same level of expertise when it comes to knob and tube systems.
Right, yeah. You want someone who's familiar with the quirks of those older systems.
Exactly. Exactly. They'll understand the materials, the techniques, and they'll be able to ensure that the upgrade is done safely and to code. They should be able to explain everything to you in a way that you can understand and answer any questions you have.
So communication is key.
Yeah.
And they should be able to respect the character and history of your home while still bringing it up to modern standards.
Absolutely. I mean, they shouldn't treat your vintage home like just another project, right?
Exactly. So find a specialist who understands the nuances. Okay, what's next?
Well, once you've got your electrician, the next step is a thorough inspection.
Right.
That's really the foundation of any upgrade project. They'll come in, they'll assess the condition of your wiring, they'll look for any immediate hazards, and they'll create a plan for the upgrades and repairs, and they'll also discuss your electrical needs. We talked about those modern appliances. They'll make sure that your system can handle the load. It's kind of like a health checkup and a consultation for your home's electrical system, all rolled into one.
I like that analogy. Okay, but let's talk about the actual upgrades. I mean, what exactly does it involve?
Well, one of the most important things is to bring your home up to modern safety standards.
Right.
We mentioned earlier ground fault circuit interrupters, GFCIs, and arc fault circuit interrupters, AFCIs.
Right. Those are the lifesavers.
Exactly. Those are essential for preventing shocks and fires. So those will need to be installed. But it also involves updating the wiring itself.
Right. So are we talking about just swapping out the old knob and tube for modern wiring, or is there more to it than that?
It can involve a combination of techniques. Sometimes sections of the knob and tube can be safely abandoned in place, especially if they're not actively serving any outlets or fixtures. But other times it might be necessary to completely remove and replace sections with modern grounded wiring. And then, of course, your electrical panel and breakers will likely need an upgrade too, because those old panels just weren't designed for the kind of electrical demands we have today.
Right. I mean, think about all the things we plug in now. It's a lot different than it was back then.
Yeah, exactly.
Oh.
So it's really a customized approach depending on the specific needs of each home. And it's important to find an electrician who can tailor the upgrade to your home's unique situation.
I mean, that's a lot of technical stuff. I'm starting to feel a little overwhelmed just listening to this.
All right.
Is this something that that homeowners really need to understand in detail, or should they just leave it to the pros?
You don't need to be an electrician to get your wiring upgraded right. The most important thing is to find a professional that you trust and that you can communicate with and who can explain things to you in a way that's clear and understandable.
Yeah.
You should feel comfortable asking questions and raising any concerns you have.
That's a good point. Because I think some homeowners might be hesitant to even bring it up with an electrician for fear of, getting hit with a huge, scary estimate.
Yeah, that's understandable. But, electrical upgrades are an investment. They're an investment in the safety and value of your home. Think about it. What's the cost of peace of mind? What price would you put on protecting your loved ones from potential hazards?
You're right. You're absolutely right. It's not just about wires and circuits. It's about creating a safe and secure environment for the people you care about.
Yeah.
So let's shift gears for a moment and talk about the historical significance of knob and tube wiring. I mean, it's a part of our architectural heritage, right?
It's kind of cool to think about those early electricians bringing electricity into homes for the first time. Oh, absolutely. It's fascinating to think about the ingenuity and craftsmanship of those early electricians.
Yeah.
I mean, they were trailblazers. They were bringing light and power into homes for the first time. They were figuring things out as they went along.
Right.
And the systems they created, they're still working in many homes today.
Yeah.
So yeah, there's definitely a historical significance there. But the challenge now is to find a balance between preserving that history and
Yeah.
ensuring safety, right?
Exactly. And that's where working with specialized electricians is so important.
Yeah.
They understand the importance of maintaining the character of older homes while bringing them up to modern standards. So it's about finding those creative solutions, using compatible materials, and respecting the integrity of the original architecture.
Right. It's the best of both worlds. Yeah.
Exactly. A modern safety and vintage charm.
You got it.
I like it. But let's talk about insurance. We mentioned earlier that insurance companies tend to get a little, well, a little nervous about knob and tube wiring.
Hmm.
Why is that?
It's all about risk assessment. Insurance companies look at the statistics and they see that older wiring systems are associated with a higher incidence of electrical fires and other hazards.
Hmm.
So they're just trying to manage their risk.
Okay. So it's not personal, it's just business. But let's say our listener has knob and tube wiring and they're worried about their insurance.
Yeah.
What can they do to kind of ease those concerns?
Be proactive. Contact your insurance company. Let them know about your wiring and explain the steps you're taking or plan to take to address those potential safety issues. Documentation is really important.
Okay.
If you've had a professional inspection, share that report with them.
Okay.
If you've done any upgrades, give them details about the work that was done. It shows that you're not ignoring the problem.
Right. It shows you're taking responsibility and being proactive. But what if you're not ready to, do a full rewiring just yet? Are there some things you can do to just minimize those risks in the meantime and maybe even appease the insurance company a little bit?
Yeah, definitely. First and foremost, never attempt to do any DIY electrical work on knob and tube wiring.
Right. Call
It's
pray.
complex, it's potentially dangerous. Always call a licensed professional for any electrical work, especially with knob and tube.
Okay, that's a good rule of thumb. What else can homeowners do?
Be mindful of your electrical load. Avoid plugging too many devices into a single circuit, especially those high wattage appliances. Spread out your usage. Unplug things when you're not using them.
So don't run the vacuum, the hairdryer, and the microwave all at the same time.
That's a good way to put it. Another simple step is to replace those old two-prong outlets with modern three-prong grounded outlets.
Okay.
That won't solve the underlying grounding issue with the knob and tube wiring itself, but it can add an extra layer of protection for those appliances and devices that have a ground prong.
Okay. Those are all great tips that our listeners can, put into practice right away. But I want to circle back to something you mentioned earlier, code compliance. Can you elaborate on what that means and why it's so important?
Sure. Code compliance basically means that your electrical system meets the current safety standards outlined in the National Electrical Code, NEC. And those codes are regularly updated to reflect, the latest advancements and best practices in electrical safety. And believe me, they've evolved quite a bit since the days of knob and tube.
I bet they have.
Yeah.
So, aside from grounding, what are some of the key things that a modern code compliance system should have?
Well, those GFCIs and AFCIs we talked about earlier are really essential. They've become standard in new construction for a reason.
Yeah.
They're incredibly effective at preventing shocks and fires.
Right.
But there are other code requirements, too, that address things like wire size, circuit capacity, placement of outlets and switches. It's really all about ensuring that your electrical system is safe, efficient, and reliable. So if you're upgrading from knob and tube, you're not just replacing old wires. You're essentially bringing your home's electrical system into the 21st century.
I think that's a great point to pause for now. We've covered a lot of ground, but there's still more to explore. We'll be back in just a moment to continue our deep dive into knob and tube wiring with some final thoughts and key takeaways. All right, we're back. And I don't know about you, but I'm feeling a lot more informed about all this knob and tube stuff.
Yeah.
But I gotta admit, I'm maybe just a little bit more anxious about it now, too.
That's understandable.
Yeah.
But, like we said, awareness is key.
Right, absolutely. Okay, so let's recap some of the key things we learned in our knob and tube deep dive here. What are the main takeaways?
Well, we started by talking about what knob and tube wiring actually is, how it works.
Mm-hmm.
That clever system with the insulated wires, porcelain knobs, and those tubes,
Mm-hmm.
all designed to safely bring electricity into those early homes.
Right, and for its time, it really was a pretty innovative system.
Oh, absolutely.
But then, of course, we had to address the not-so-great aspects, the risks that come along with, well, any aging electrical system, but especially knob and tube.
Yeah. We just talked about that lack of a ground wire, the insulation that can break down over time,
Mm-hmm.
and, the potential for overloaded circuits. All of those things can create real hazards, fire risks, and, well, headaches for homeowners today.
And even if you aren't seeing any obvious signs of trouble, like, lights flickering or breakers
All
tripping,
right.
we talked about how important it is to have a professional come in and inspect the wiring just to be on the safe side.
Yeah. It's like a checkup, for your electrical system.
Exactly. And we also discussed how important it is to find an electrician who specializes in older homes, someone who really knows how to work with knob and tube systems safely and effectively.
Yeah. It's not just about yanking out old wires and throwing in new ones. You want someone who understands those older materials, who knows how to work within the existing structure, and who respects the history of your home while still making sure it's safe.
Right. Finding that balance, right.
Yeah.
Modernizing without sacrificing the character.
Yeah.
And then, of course, there's the insurance issue. We learned that, well, most insurance companies aren't exactly thrilled about knob and tube wiring.
Yeah, they get a little bit apprehensive.
Yeah, to put it mildly. But we also learned that being proactive can help address those concerns.
Right. Communication is key. Talk to your insurance company. Let them know about your wiring. Tell them what steps you're taking or planning to take to address the safety issues. Show them that you're taking responsibility.
Exactly. Documentation is also really important. Sharing those inspection reports, providing details about any upgrades you've made, it all helps. And even if you aren't quite ready for a full rewiring project, there are still things you can do in the meantime to minimize those risks.
Absolutely. Like being mindful of your electrical load, not overloading those circuits,
Mm-hmm.
and replacing those old two-prong outlets with the three-prong grounded outlets is a good idea.
Right. And of course, the golden rule, no DIY electrical work.
Yeah, that's just asking for trouble.
Leave that to the professionals. So I guess the bottom line is if you've got knob and tube wiring, you need to be aware of the potential risks, take steps to mitigate them, and always consult with a qualified electrician before doing anything. We've covered a lot of ground today, but hopefully you're walking away feeling more knowledgeable, empowered, and maybe even a little more appreciative of those pioneering electricians who brought light into our homes all those years ago.
Yeah, I mean, they were really ahead of their time.
They were. Well, that's it for our knob and tube deep dive. Thanks for joining us. We'll see you next time. Stay curious and stay safe out there.